Good day! For this video, we will going to tackle about the reference traditions from personal assistance to instructional intervention. And there are several topics that we will going to discuss. First, we have the personal assistance in public libraries, service traditions in academic libraries, taxonomy of reference service levels, dissenting views and critics of reference services, 20th century instructional initiatives in academic libraries, the mid-century information explosion, Knapp's experiment, the value of teaching library use skills in context, BI in the 21st century, strategies and techniques. And these are the topics that we will going to talk about. And according to Otis Robinson, a librarian should be more than a keeper of books. He should be an educator. No such librarian is fit for his place unless he holds himself responsible for the library education of his students. While programs of instruction are most often considered the special province of academic and school libraries, the realization that public libraries could contribute to the creation of an informed citizenry emerged in American public libraries as early as the 1820s. Indeed, the practice of educating the library user to locate and use appropriate library resources can best be understood as an outgrowth of traditional forms of reference services in public libraries that date back almost 2 centuries. As chronicled by Roth, Sain, and others, the first efforts in this direction, which actually predated the adoption of formal reference services by many decades, included provision of all the information requested by library patrons, as well as guidance and direction in its pursuit. So we have here first the personal assistance in public libraries. Slightly more aggressive patterns of reference service than the sporadic offerings of personal assistance characteristic of the early years first appeared at the Boston Public Library in the 1850s, where a naive faith in the efficacy of good reading in the preservation of virtue prompted the institution to commit itself to popular education. Although entirely consistent with the values of the times, Boston Public visions of itself as a new tool for scholarship did not immediately usher in a golden age of library service nor inspire the creation. So in 1920s, most public libraries had adopted a dual service model. Although reference most frequently consisted of librarians providing answers and information directly to library users rather than giving instruction, unless they specifically requested it. Others found a solution in the creation of a separate information desk which could handle directional inquiries expeditiously while channeling more important information questions to experts in the reference department. So Herbert Putnam conceived Library of Congress known as interpretive chairs, which means librarians trained to provide active aid and counsel to researchers working in the library. While Robert said the extra measure of assistance available through these individuals included advice on relevant sources and special reference materials, suggestions on procedural and stylistic matters related to the creation of the user's manuscript, and constructive criticism. So, we have here the service traditions in academic libraries. The status of the library as a cultural institution par excellence has seldom been questioned. Rather grandly, Francis Laber described libraries as the bridges over which civilization travels from generation to generation and from country to country. So, we have first George Ticknor. In 1816, George Ticknor described the library as the light and spirit of the university and its first convenience. He said, "Give me a library, and I will build a university about it." Next, we have Frederick A.P. Barnard. He is the president of Columbia University, expressed his enthusiastic support for instruction and aid to undergraduates shall enable them in all their afterlives to do their individual work more readily and more successfully, while the American historian Herbert Baxter Adams found highly commendable a course in bibliographical information taught to his students by the librarian of their college or university. Next, we have here Justin Wenser's legacy, the move to instruct users. Near the end of the 19th century, the development of an instructional model for reference service was advanced at Harvard University, where the professor of books, librarian Justin Wenser, actively encouraged both library staff and ordinary library users to provide research assistance. According to a procedure created by Wenser, information seekers could post notes and queries, which means on a spindle on the reference room, anyone interested in finding the answer to someone's questions could post it for others to read. Next, we have Columbia College Melville Dewey. I know we are already familiar with this person as he make large contributions in every libraries. So, writing as early as 1884, Dewey set forth his expectations in addition to organizing and cataloging library materials and providing reference resources. Librarians were to furnish advice and instruction so that students would gain knowledge of the best library resources and be competent to use them intelligently and in the proper order. So next we have here Princeton's William Warner Bishop. He is a classical scholar who served as a librarian at Princeton and the University of Michigan, as well as the Library of Congress, to articulate a comprehensive framework for instruction that has an amazingly contemporary ring, noting the deluge of new material published each year. Bishop in 1912 recommended that students be educated in acquiring a scholar's attitude toward the printed page. So we have also here Vassar's Lucy Maynard Salmon. Salmon believed that because the professors knew individual students and their particular research needs, they were in the best position to provide library instruction relevant to ongoing course assignments and requirements. Not only did it make good sense to incorporate knowledge of how to use a library with the subject matter included in a particular course, but it would also save everyone's time. Next, we will going to talk about the taxonomy of reference service levels. So, Donald G. Weber, he described these differences in terms of the taxonomy of service levels, which consists of conservative, moderate, and liberal. So later on, we will going to discuss about the difference of these three levels. So we have here the three taxonomy service of levels. So first we have the conservative level. So when we say conservative level, the librarians was characterized as an intelligent guidepost with the self-development of the library users as the ultimate goal of any service extended. While in moderate level, typical of a moderate level of service, the interpretation of information and its utilization, however, continued to be regarded as the responsibility of the library users. So, in liberal level, the librarian was obliged to use her or his expertise to find the information sought by patrons and to provide direct assistance in establishing the relevance, authority, and authenticity of a particular titles. So next, we have here dissenting views and critics of reference services. It is perhaps not surprising to note that the conservative and liberal approaches to reference service were seldom embraced with equal enthusiasm within the same institution. Indeed, across the profession, there has never been anything to total agreement as to what constitutes best practice in the delivery of user services. Over time, the liberal direct profession camp of librarians has promoted its view with eloquence and humor, often dismissing as ludicrous the very notion that the library should be in the business of educating users. And we have here service ambiguities. Okay, on a more serious note, Skeller has asserted that efforts to provide both instruction services and information services within the same institution are self-defeating because, in his view, the two approaches are inherently antagonistic. As a result, when users hesitate fully to explain their information needs, librarians have the problematic task of reinterpreting their questions to discover what is actually wanted. And in inappropriate content and audience, Eddy in 1990 has objected to BI in college libraries on the grounds that in the long run, the content of instructional sessions most often addresses location skills rather than the more challenging and useful cognitive tasks related to making sense of the materials. In addition to critiquing BI on instructional grounds, Eddy has argued that the entire exercise is aimed at the wrong goals instead of saving the time of the reader. So, in information seeking versus research, for his part, Stone in 1984 has warned academic librarians against presenting information skills as research skills, which, as he asserts, are not equivalent nor bear any organic relationship to each other. Stone in 1984 has also argued against trying to teach students a single generic research strategy because scholarly approaches to informed seeking are personal, domain-specific, subject, and intuitive. So in 20th century instructional initiatives in academic libraries, the most common approaches to library instruction during the early years were library lectures, which were usually followed by some sort of assignments that required students to use the library and its array of bibliographical tools and resources. It became evident over time that the stronger programs were those in which the librarian worked closely with the college professors. So we have here Stephen College B. Lamar Johnson. An interesting program of library skills instruction was launched at Stephens College in Columbia, Missouri in the early 1930s by V. Lamar Johnson. So, basic to the Stephens approach were clearly articulated objectives that emphasized instruction in the use of the library resources and the development of good study skills as prerequisites for learning. So next we have Peabody College Lewis Shores. So what Shores envisions was a library college in which all the teachers would be library trained and in charge of supervising and tutoring individual students in independently conducted reading and research projects. So, among Short's notable contributions to the discourse of academic librarianship were the ideas that learning should be student-centered and interdisciplinary, and that creating independent learners was the appropriate goal of education. So, in the mid-century information explosion, although the explosion of scientific knowledge immediately evident in the years following World War II raised concerns of many mid-century librarians about the problems that this Niagara of information might pose for the general public as well as for students. Little progress in users' instruction in the academic library was made during the next 2 decades. In spite of a burgeoning undergraduate population and expanding collections, lack of library staff, lack of viable conceptual framework, lack of enthusiasm, and lack of instructional funds together lead most academic librarians to limit their instructional efforts to orientation sessions and library tours. So, we have here the table that shows the summary of themes and insights in early efforts at library use instruction. First, we have the roles for librarians as teachers, advisors, consultants, and information providers. Pedagogical training as prerequisite for teaching librarians. Importance of faculty and librarian collaboration in planning. Importance of teaching library use skills in context of a research task. Value of information use skills over location and access skills. The librarian as an identifier of relevant resources. And lastly, the librarian assists with research products under evaluation. Next, we have here NUP's experiment. The program that rekindled the flame of interest in BI among academic and school librarians was created by Patricia Bryan Knapp at Wayne State University in the early 1960s. She convinced that competence in library use constituted one of the liberal arts, and recognizing the key role that college faculty played in student use of library resources, Knapp launched an initiative to instruct the instructors in the use of the library, its resources, and its educational value by integrating library instruction into a wide variety of courses in order to demonstrate the applicability of library skills across the curriculum. Next, we have also here a table that shows a summary of insights from the Knapp project. So first, we have the library use as a multi-dimensional activity involving knowledge, skills, and attitudes. The value of teaching library use skills in context, the value of integrating library use skills within and across subject domains, the importance of systematic planning for instruction, the importance of cooperation and coordination between librarians and teachers, and the importance of practicing library use skills within authentic tasks, and lastly, the importance of evaluation in the use of information resources. The value of teaching library use skills in context BI, the Erlang College experience. Another major contribution to the development of BI models was the exemplary program of library instruction created at Erlang College in the middle 1960s and implemented by librarians, which involved Ivan R. Farber, Thomas B. Kirk, and James R. Kennedy, founded on the bedrock of active cooperation between departmental scholars and college librarians. Erlang's approach to instruction featured three central principles, which consist of integration, demonstration, and gradation. So first, we have her integration. It was achieved by embedding all library instruction within courses that most often required students to use library resources. Next, we have demonstration. It was chosen as the central instructional strategy and included an introduction to the search process as well as the specific types of library resources. And lastly, we have gradation. It was achieved through the implementation of a planned sequence of instructional sessions which were conducted over the 4 years of a student's college career. So, Kennedy in 1986 identified the following strategies as contributing substantially to the overall success of Erlang's innovative program. So, we have here a table that represents the key elements of the BI program at Erlang College. First, an academic culture that demands library use, commitment of librarians and teaching faculty to the goals of the program, active rapport and collaboration between librarians and the teaching faculty, selection of appropriate courses for library skills instruction, highly motivated and interested students, high teacher expectations for student performance, small class size, just-in-time delivery of instructional intervention, and lastly, instructional quality and creativity. Although in many respects Erlang's experience and success reflected the unique qualities of that institution and its librarians, the program created at Erlang resulted in a veritable explosion of interest among academic librarians in the 1970s and continues today. Next, we have here BI in the 21st century, strategies and techniques. Contemporary strategies for BI include a variety of practices, library sessions, by teaching faculty within regularly scheduled course offerings, standalone courses conducted by a library staff, orientation programs and tours, which introduce students to the library facility, services and resources, research papers, seminars, organized to assess students involved in course-related reference assignments, manuals, handbooks, and workbooks for students to use independently, and point-of-use brochures and fact sheets. In library automation and the proliferation of digital and online resources have made internet-based library tours, information sessions, and tutorials attractive supplements for more traditional and personalized reference services in many academic libraries. Indeed, in recent years, computerized instruction has become increasingly sophisticated. For example, computer-assisted instruction, which is locally produced and tailored to the libraries in which it will be used, frequently employs voice synthesis capabilities as well as digital avatars. So, as a conclusion, an appreciation of these contributions, as well as the insightful programs and theoretical frameworks from which they arose, provide useful points of departure for school media specialists engaged in designing their own instructional programs for elementary and high school students. Especially significant are the characterizations of libraries as intellectual centers, learning laboratories, and information bureaus, the recommendation that students rely on primary and secondary sources rather than textbooks, advocacy for increasing the accessibility of library resources, models for individualized guidance, and rules for library users as independent searchers and lifelong learners. So that's it. I hope you have learned something from our video discussion, which talks about the reference traditions from personal assistance to instructional intervention. Thank you.